I'm an interaction designer working in Knowit in Oslo. And I'm going to talk about user interface regression testing and the question if the time is now. Yeah, I'm going to talk about development and testing, but I'm not expert there, but more specific automated user interface testing in the past. Why it hasn't worked from what I've seen. I'm going through Selenium, Phantom.js, this project called Nightmare and Daydream, and why Playwright and a test runner will probably work, and a little show and tell at the end. So this is my experience. It's not a kind of definitive overview of user interface regression testing, but I think it can be valuable. So first of it, user interface regression testing. What is it exactly? It's to test automatically your user interfaces to see that they still work and doesn't fall apart since last time you wrote code. And the closer you base the tests on actual user interactions and user flows, so a set of user interactions to complete a task or use a task, the better. And yeah, I'm an interaction designer during the day and maybe not at nighttime, but in the evening I code stuff for fun. I'm not an excellent programmer, but I have a lot of fun and I have big plans. Mostly what I do is creating modules and stuff that can be used for small search engines. And I want to make it possible for people to create a lot of search engines really easy and cheap, almost free. Really a lot of search engines. And the beginning, I started with for JavaScript. I thought for a long time that I want to learn JavaScript. I never got to do it. But then I started working or playing around with Node.js. And it was easy for a non-coder to start. It was always a library at hand when I didn't manage to fix stuff myself. Yeah. And I started using GitHub to store my code, so it wasn't lost all the time. And after a while, I also started to write tests and running them through Travis CI. Yeah, to check that it was still working. Yeah, and I had these big plans of things, and after a while I started to create small demos that could lead the way to bigger demos and proof of concepts. But my problem was that even if my plans are big, I felt that every time I put kind of two pieces together, two Lego bricks together for a demo, they fell apart after a short while. And I think without exceptions, my demos have, over time, all fallen apart without me knowing when it happened. And I haven't had any tests in place for the actual user interface. Yeah. So, for a long time, I've been looking around for automated UI tests. The first framework I heard about was Selenium, around 10 years ago, on a project I worked on. It could do all sorts of cool stuff, and it could. But the problem was that the developers on the project, they were mostly fixing Selenium rather than fixing bugs on the actual code. For every test we ran on Selenium, Selenium broke, not the code we were writing. And I think, yeah, the way they fixed it was to use only the Phantom.js browser, headless browser. And then they partly managed, but they didn't get to test back then in Internet Explorer, Chrome or Firefox, because that broke all the time. So then I started looking at Phantom.js, since that was the one thing working in Selenium. The problem there was, yeah, it's based on WebKit, what Safari uses or is based on. And you can control the browser with JavaScript, but it didn't have anything handy for me to I need to code a lot myself to make that work. So that was a bit more difficult, and while I was looking at that, WebKit kind of outrun Phantom.js by updates to WebKit. So WebKit is a big project. Phantom.js was a small group of developers, and keeping up with changes in upstream WebKit was too much work for those few people. And today, I think the project is abandoned. And then, yeah, I Googled a lot, so I found a new project. Or it wasn't new, but it was new for me. Daydream and Nightmare. It was created by this company, Segment.io. Daydream could record your interactions in the browser, and you could replay them automatically through scripts set up in or with Nightmare. Nightmare was an Electron-based browser, which is based on, or comes from Chromium, or based on Chromium. Yeah, and the same thing happened there. It was, they had a too little organization to keep up with upstream updates. So Chromium Electron, they pulled ahead and the project died. So I felt by this time that, okay, every time I find something, it's going to die. So I kind of left it for a while. And then some years ago, I found Playwright and started to read about the project. It's created and supported by Microsoft. I'm in historically, I've been a little skeptic to Microsoft, but for developers, they've been really well, doing really well with Visual Studio Code and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, they're going to support this, keep it up to date for a good while. And it also seemed simple enough for me to handle, which is, yeah, I can figure out complex stuff, but I need an easy start, I think. And Playwright features that I was interested in is that you can record user interactions and user flows. You can use either CSS selectors or XPath to interact with HTML elements. You can run your test framework or test runner. I'm using Ava.js because it's simple enough and I don't have too many demands there, I think. Yeah. And you can test on Chrome or Chromium, Safari through WebKit and Firefox. And with Chromium, yeah, then you cover a lot of the Edge, Microsoft Edge as well, even if not all. And you can test on Windows, OS X, and Linux. You can emulate phones, but not have kind of the real deal So of course that can lead to issues. But what I'm doing is not that advanced, so I think that will be, yeah, that will go well. And it's kept up to date, and it's a dependency for some of my projects, but I'm also really happy that it's not kept up to date in this excessive way with updates every second day or something. It's 2 or 3 times a month. So it's a perfect match for me so far. Yeah. So we'll show and tell. Yeah. Let's see, I can just mirror the screens. The recording part. Yeah, you shouldn't use the recording part out of the box, but it's a good scaffold for writing your own tests. And you get to record the user interactions, but you need to tweak them a little bit to make them more sturdy or make your tests more sturdy. Let's see, there's a shell. So you can generate code by saying that Playwright can code generate on your web page. So you get a little window for recording on the script, and you can record for different languages. I use JavaScript. It's Java, .NET, and Python, I think, in addition. For this, I made this small calculator. It's not anything to use, but it's just to show. It's a Node.js library, and then it's bundled or built for using in the browser as well. So you can click, add a number, 2 numbers to each other. You can subtract, multiply, and divide. And that you get recorded, the scaffold for your test script. You can run it, but you need to tweak it a little bit so it doesn't fall apart so easily. And for now, I also like to make it run through, this can just be run with just Playwright, but you can also, I want to use Ava.js for now, at least for that. So that's the recording part. And also you have, just to show, there it is. And the web page for Playwright has good documentation. You can choose which language you're interested in. For JavaScript, it has Typescript and JavaScript, I think, examples. So I'm using it kind of in the introductory part for now. That's my need for now, or needs for now. So it covers my needs for now, so it's okay. But it has a lot of advanced stuff too. And I can just show you if you run if you run the test for the project. I have made CommonJS, ECMAScript module tests, and browser tests or user interface tests. So it bundles, and then it runs test for CommonJS, ECMAScript modules, and then in the end, your user interface. That's how you run it on the server, but when you want to check, it is good to see that, okay, what's actually happening? Is it happening what I want to do? So you can say for Playwright, you can say that headless is false, set it to false, and you can say set kind of a slow motion value to make it run a little less fast. So then it opens the browser, do the tests, and check them. And I haven't done that yet, but you can, or I just take some screenshots, but I'm guessing you can set it up so, not if, but when user interface tests fails, you can make a report with what it should look like and what it did look like, so you're kind of a bit closer to understanding what happened in your code. So here you have kind of the screenshots that the scripts make throughout the tests. And I think for user interface tests, it's the thing I told about making it very close to what users do. If I have a task, then the test, you should have one test for that task. You can do assertions within that test to see that did this work, did that work, did this thing over here work, and was the end result okay. But make it as one test, because then you get all the intermediate steps that smaller, narrow scoped tests wouldn't pick up on. Yes. So, yeah, so to see your actual user tests, user interface test, set the headless to false and slow mo value to something. It's milliseconds. And for the scripts that is generated, what I call the scaffold, it uses page fill, but that doesn't trigger an on-change check in your application. So if you're using that, then it wouldn't trigger it. So then I need to change it to page type. And it's Playwright, I read it. It's on purpose. The CSS selectors it use or generates or grabs, it's kind of on a form that input type equal number. And when I look at my demo, it's like, okay, but how can you differentiate between this and that field? Because I have two fields with input type number. And so I guess it just picks the first one, but then I'm changing it to CSS IDs instead. So even if I change my code, where the elements are and stuff like that, it would still work. Yeah. So we can just go back. Here. So is the time now for user interface tests? I think so. If I can do it, so can you. The question is, of course, if you need it. If you're making user interfaces, I think you should at least test some to make sure that it's still working. You don't need to go overboard, but just start, and then if you find a bug that the test didn't cover, just kind of expand your test suite. And also, I figured out through my latest project, latest customer, that Selenium now, it works really well. So don't kind of be discouraged from using that. It's a little bit more kind of to just dive into it. I felt it was kind of, it was a website talking to companies and large organizations instead of developers, but it works really well. And it gives value to the users. So you should check out that one as well. And there are others that do more advanced stuff. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, is it possible to write tests with Playwright in pure JavaScript or pure TypeScript, like not not clicking through the user interface, but just
Yeah,
programming it?
you can just program it.
Is that efficient for developers to do? Or is it better to use the...
I think if you've done it after a while, clicking through, you can do that. But you may miss some steps that the user actually did. So if you do that, you don't test that step.
But the artifact is pure code.
Yeah, it's just JavaScript.
Sure.
So it's, yeah, it translates really well. Yep.
Based on your research and experience, which of the frameworks have the best documentation?
I think JavaScript or the languages.
No, the frameworks.
Oh yeah, Selenium or yeah. I just didn't get to that point, so it was more kind of after I started using Playwright and I'm happy with it. I saw that, or I heard that they were using Selenium at the customer's project, and then I looked at the site and saw that they are still very much alive. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Your question was if it was pure, you can write it in pure code. Yes, you can. And your question was which project was best documented, and I don't know. I never got to it. But people are using Selenium thoroughly, kind of in depth, and it's been around for a long, long time, so I'm guessing it is really good. Yeah.
So one thing that drew me to Selenium originally, many years ago, was Selenium IDE and the fact that you could put non-technical people, product owners and others, and have them define the test. You could put testers or non-technical people in creating the test. Of course, that broke tremendously, right?
Yeah.
But is the user interface of Playwright in such a state that product owners or testers or designers can sit down and create user interface tests?
Yeah, so the question is, in Selenium, you can set non-technical people to create the tests, and if that's possible within Playwright. Yes, it is. Yeah, you can even make a button instead of just that kind of script, the cold start, and then I think you need first to define, okay, what's the step you want the user to actually do, and then you do it, and then you say save on that file and give it to a developer. Yeah. Yeah. More questions? No. Thank you.